ladies and gentlemen. The Kids in the Room podcast. The Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.
Woo! All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today we've got Stephen Ma. That's right, Stephen Ma, who's a really cool guy, a friend of mine who I would like to call him a friend. He's a friend. He's a cool guy. He's actually on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about tech. We're going to talk about product design and all kinds of cool stuff. So I wanted to bring Stephen on. Stephen, what's going on?
Hey, not a whole lot. Tavares, good to be here, and thanks for having me. So, life is good, man. I can't complain.
Yeah, man, it's been a little while. Haven't caught up with you and stuff like that. And what have you been up to? What's going on? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like for the benefit of the audience, right? We were chit-chatting before the call, and it's been 2 years since we last caught up. And
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing about like the connections people have. Like sometimes you don't have to talk to each other constantly, and you still like feel like you haven't missed a single beat. So
These are the facts.
it's really like testament to the kind of personality you are. So just a little bit myself. I've been a UX designer for the last 20 plus years, and I specialize in UX design in the area of product. So what I do is I take the business problems that my employers have or my customers have and try to really turn it into a usable, simple solution for them, right? So a lot of time you look at an app, you're like, wow, I have no idea what this icon is. Like that's what I do. And sometimes like you look at the workflow, you're like, why is it so complicated? Why do we have to like click 20 buttons before we get to the end? That's what UX designer do. We try to simplify things to make things usable, simple for the user to use. So in my career, I started at IBM for 12 years, spent the next 3 years at Amazon, and most recently I am the head of UX in a company called Pure Storage in Mountain View, California.
Amazing. You hear that, guys? Amazing. Listen to this, guys. Amazing, right? So Stephen, could you break down what are the core components, that we're looking for when we're looking at a product designer in our field?
Yeah, like so when it comes to product design, what you have to understand is that we don't design for the sake of having fun. I mean, love to have fun in the process, but first and foremost, you really have to understand whether you are a freelancer, whether you are an in-house designer, really understand the business objective. Like we're employed for a reason. I think there is some business entity that says, hey, we need to deliver this function, features, and app that allows us to get to the end game, which is hopefully make money, grow the market, or both, right? Or reduce costs. So in those cases, what you really often try to do is understand where your employer is coming from. Why are they interested in doing this project? What are you trying to get out of it, right? And then you flip it over and you ask, what can we do to best serve the customer of this business, right? And you try to really kind of hit a sweet spot between the business and the customer. Along the way, you do business to understand what the customers need, what the business really need out of this project, and you go through a lot of iteration from a design point of view to research, understand, and to really kind of put together a wireframe that allows you to kind of turn into like polished, good-looking mock-up to the point where you actually enter into a prototype mode. You create some prototype, you test it with the users, and eventually kind of work with developers and PM to really get the design refined and implemented, and you get it out the door and you do it all over again. That in a nutshell is what designers do on a regular basis.
And Stephen, this is amazing that you explained it for some of your audience out there. But for the audience out there who's curious and they have no idea what product designers are, and some of these these terms that you're using, when you're saying in-house designer versus in-house and things like that, or when you're talking about product managers and things like that, could you define some of those things for the audience? Yeah.
Yeah. Like so, I mean, as a UX designers, oftentimes you kind of fall in bucket in terms of things that you do, and a lot of times dictated by your employment. So starting with a lot of people in my industry, they were like freelancers. So they basically work with clients who have specific needs and try to turn them into a tangible asset, deliverable, right? So that's one kind of design work that we can take on. And then they're like designers who are hired by the company, like the big enterprises, startups. We call those in-house. You are employed by a employer. You tend to work on the design of a product or a feature over multiple life cycles. And a lot of cases, you get to see the evolution of a product features. And then there are like other cases where you work with agencies and like they would work with different clients. So one day you could be working for a medical applications, right? The next month you could be doing something for social media, and then the next month you could be working on an applications for enterprise customers, and then like the following month you could be working on wearable apps. So like agencies, freelancers, and in-house, I think typically those were like the common sort of like work situations for designers. Did I
Hmm.
miss anything?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
did I
no,
miss
you know,
any obvious one?
you went on, you did it. You said what you needed to
All
say.
right.
So, Stephen, like, how did you get into design? Like, how did you become a designer? And I love what you're drinking over there. What are you drinking over there? A nice Lipton iced tea.
This is
Yeah,
purely non-alcoholic drink. Yeah,
awesome. I love that
because
Lipton iced
I'm a
tea.
professional. I don't drink
No, who would do
on the
that?
job, obviously.
I've got my
Yeah, like
Lacroix,
who would do that?
right here. It's just, you know,
Yeah, yeah. Like
fizzling up.
mine's like the color version of lacrosse, obviously. So how did I get in? I think like it's one thing I love to share with people is, like very simple, just say yes. So when I graduated a long, long time ago, I was actually looking for, I'm a Canadian myself. I was looking for work, and it was the summer of, I think 1999, when I was trying to kind of find a job in Toronto, Canada. And
Nice.
IBM rejected me, like, dude, we don't want you. You're kind of inexperienced, right? And then like the same IBM in Silicon Valley, they're like, hey, we got a job opening. It's a 3-month employment opportunity. They call it supplement position, which is kind of like um, I think like it's kind of like similar to an internship position.
Okay.
And I just came out to California, and I think I did a pretty good job where they wanted me to stay. And like from that point on, I just got on this journey of doing design work and haven't really looked back then. So it all really started by just saying yes to opportunities. And oftentimes you're like, what do I know about California? Like I've never been to the States, and why would I want to do that, right? And but when you say yes to opportunities, I really believe that like good things tend to happen.
Wow. Yeah. Saying yes to opportunities. There's a deeper meaning in that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I mean, so you started off. You were in Canada. Like, how did you just come over to the United States and just start, working? Like, did you have to go through any legal things like work visa, sponsorship, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is it's all kind of like a blur right now. I think back then, I think IBM did a really good job just supporting the employees. They basically have an agency that could handle all the visa needed. And being a Canadian, I think it was the TN visa that I needed in order for me to get a working visa to work in the States. So it wasn't complicated, right? And IBM was kind enough to kind of like sponsor me in terms of getting green card and so forth. So just great company,
And
and
that's great.
got
But
nothing to complain about.
yeah, I mean, that's
And
great. But like,
yeah,
let me ask you another question. Like, how hard was it to get IBM to actually sponsor you? Because, like, I mean, getting a company to sponsor you, is that such an easy thing now, in our space and technology, especially
that's
for
a
a
really
designer,
good question.
especially for a
I
designer.
had no idea. That's something I have no idea like why they had to go to Canada and find a designer when they probably could have find like maybe they just didn't have any luck at the time that I was applying.
Yeah, but that was like
A lot of
1990.
times
That
it
was 1999, though, right? That was a long time
it was
ago. Like, there's
1999.
there's still a shortage of
So
product designers, so it was probably hard. I mean, yeah.
yeah, like so I had it good. I think that's a really good point. So product design wasn't even a thing back then, right? So to think back to evolution of sort of product design, you have to really go back in history to figure out like the history of UX. Really started when we start to look at like putting human in the context of a larger computer system, right? Back in the day when people operate in front of nuclear reactor dashboard, or like drive like flying behind a cockpit, or trying to kind of operate these large really ancient computer system. And back then I think people would discover that what, when we put human in front of a computer, funny thing happens,
Hmm.
and discover a lot of situations where what we expect human to do actually did not happen. So there was a big body of research that went in to study human in the context of human computer interactions, right? So back in the 60s, 70s, there were like a big body of research, but back then there was no UX, there was no product design. And just like everything else, it's kind of like fashion industry, right? So HCI slowly became user-centered design. I think back in the 80s and 90s, and eventually, I think like as life would have it, like I think people like UCB sounds cool, but not as cool as UX, right? And
Oh.
of course, like from UX, now we have like design thinking, we have product design, and I fully anticipate in the next 20 years, we might have a new name for this, right? Because just because I think we want to rebrand the industry every like 10, 15 years. But the gist of what we do really is to understand how human can be optimized in terms of the performance inside of human computer interactions.
Right, and solving those
I
problems.
think that's a long-winded answer to something you did not ask for.
No, I mean, I think it's roughly there. I mean, because like when you start going to different tier companies and stuff like that, it's really well defined. Like some of those companies out there, your Googles, your Facebooks, and your LinkedIn's, they kind of define them a little bit more in detail. They have their own little, settings or their own little kind of like, I don't know what you want to call it, their own like terms or
Little
what they
box.
consider to be a product designer. That's your design thinking, right? How well you're understanding
Mhm.
the business need and first people need first. People need first. You're solving customer needs,
Right.
human centered design, and then there's the visual design, and that's really your visual chops and how beautiful your typography and things like that, your fonts and different things like that, and visual hierarchy. And then your
Mhm.
interaction design, which is more about the interaction of the human as far as like thinking about the buttons and the interaction with the other screens and whatever it may be on that actual screen. Then kind of like your soft skills,
Right.
your being proactive, your drive and things like that, and self-awareness. So they've kind of broken them down to your hard skills and down to your soft skills, and they've kind of structuralized it to where it's easy to kind of like judge people. Ooh.
Right. Yeah, that's the point. We gotta put people in buckets, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
It's really interesting. I think like what you said kind of makes me think about my team and I recently went through like a series of hiring activity, and when it comes to finding talent to work in this field, oftentimes we have to go beyond just like what you described. Can this person do like visual design? Do they can they master topography? Right, like. In a sense, I think those are hard skills that are, relatively speaking, easy to identify because you look at somebody's portfolio of work, you can see, well, this person can get it. What's harder for talent evaluators, like exactly like you said, like does the person have the soft skills necessary for them to be successful?
Hmm.
Can they persevere? Right? Can they take ownership of something? Can they collaborate? And I would say that's the type of skill set that goes beyond design. I would challenge anybody to say otherwise, right? If you're an employer, don't you want to find somebody with sense of ownership, leadership? Yeah, like the answer, of course, yes. So I think like whether you're in design or not, or whatever discipline you're in, I kind of feel like that. You know what? If you really want to grow and just become a better professional, become even like better human being, those are things you really want to focus on and really get better at.
Yeah, those are great questions, Stephen. I mean, because like when we're thinking about product design, we're thinking about showing that proactivity, that drive, that leadership. These soft skills.
Mhm.
These are amazing skills to have. But then there's a question of like how much of those soft skills does that company or team want? Because if I'm a product manager or if I'm design manager and et
Mhm.
cetera, do I want a leader that might overshadow me at some point, or like where's this like this level of balance that needs to be instilled in one who's an aspiring product designer or who is a product designer, because it has to be like everybody has their own biases. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question that I think probably we can spend like hours and hours
Yeah.
discussing, right? But the way I look at it is that these days, as we have more sort of like schools such as like General Assembly, Springboard, and I think you name it, right? Flatiron, that kind of help people kind of like get a like certificate in design. You have the same sort of like developer schools, data science schools, and so forth. Now, like the differentiator is no longer whether you have the hard skills or not. I think when you apply for a job, we expect you to have like a certain level of core competency when it
Hmm.
comes to design. It's exactly what we just covered, right? Like interaction skills, wireframe, ability to use and learn new tools. So with those, to us these days, they're like table stake. Everybody should be comfortable kind of talking about the work they do and so forth. So that's really if you say like all these things, you're like, okay, yeah, but so do the 200 candidates applying for the same position. So where you can really and truly differentiate yourself really comes down to the sort of leadership skill that you have, the ownership, the collaborative skills, right? I think those things are easier said than done. Some people can learn it. Other people, for whatever reason, just don't quite get it. And then you have people who just naturally a leader. And I think those are the kind of skills, and especially if you look at a lot of big companies, when you look at the culture, right? Just go and find a company that you admire, right? Go to the career page and look at the description for the culture. 90% of the time you see descriptions like, we're very collaborative, we love owners, we want leaders. So if you ever get into a situation where like your boss is kind of like worried about you being too strong a leader, I would say that's not a company you want to work at. Good companies should have people who feel secure, right? Who knows what they need to do, and who feel good about like what they're able to contribute, and meanwhile being able to help their team members to succeed. That to me is really the sign of a good company, right? So if you ever get into a company where like your boss is really like kind of like mindful that you're stealing all the credit, then probably that's not a good situation to be in the long run.
I mean, I think in theory this is definitely 100% of like, it's accurate in as far as like, it's an ideal scenario, but the reality is that people are human, and people do,
Mhm.
have subconscious biases, and people do want, people want to game up. People like their career. People, like their position, especially those who worked really hard to get there. And it's like, I feel like that there's a balance of how much proactivity and drive, that they can deal with, or that they're wanting, because there is still a structure that exists. You still do have design
Mhm.
manager and design directors and these things like that. And so how far can you overshadow that? You have to have that buy-in and respect from those, those upper partners or your team in general in order to be able to do
Mhm.
that. And it's like, if you don't have that, you could have all the leadership, qualities you want to have, but if there's conflict internally where certain people don't get along with each other, and it's because humans don't always get along, right? You just have to
Right, right.
learn how to figure out and wiggle through things. But like, when these situations come to play, it's like, as an actual product designer or an owner, what would you consider an owner? Who would be an owner to the audience out there of a product? What would you define an
Yeah.
owner?
So I often look at product design as a team sport, just like I love football. So I pardon pardon my
Who's your
analogy,
favorite
right?
football?
So
Who's your
if you
favorite?
look at God, like do I have any? Oh, you know what?
I'm gonna put
I
you on spot.
don't. But I have my Cowboys jersey and things tucked under, and it's kind of like inconvenient for me to kind of take them out. I'm a big Cowboys fan, so
All
it's
right.
amazing that throughout my sort of my career, how often I look at the construction of a football club, or like in this case, football team, and the makeup and all that, and I can see a parallel into how we build team in real life. Not to say football is not real life, right? So, like for example, right, no football team ever won by having a really great offense and a really bad defense, and vice versa. And oftentimes we overlook the fact that there is a special team, and and these are like different people for those like non-American football audience of yours, right? So essentially, a team typically have like 47 or 52 players in the team, right? And you have like subset of players playing offense, subset of them playing defense, and subset that come from offense and defense that play special teams. So these three elements of your team combined together contribute to the success of your team, right?
Hmm.
And in product is very similar. You have your product managers, you have your designers, you have your developers. Typically, these three roles, and I'm overlooking the fact that there are like a lot of other roles such as QA, tech writers, and so forth. But just for the simplicity of this conversation, right? Let's focus on product manager, designers, and developers,
And
right?
define
Oftentimes they come together really
right. And can we
to
define
develop. Yeah, go
those
ahead.
to the audience? Can we define a product manager, a PM? Can we define a developer versus a product designer, and what levels those are, and how they kind of typically interact, or what is the expectation from your experience?
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm so glad you kind of stopped me in the track as I start to dive into like the details. Like I cannot say that I know everything that they do. Like, but typically at high level, a product manager owns the entirety of the product from the requirements, right? What goes into the release. So, like for a smartwatch, right? Like sometimes they have to make a tough decision. Do we want heart rate monitor or do we want like the stopwatch, right? Like if we cannot have both, right? What do we do? So like product manager would define what we need for like we want MVP or like we want of this product, we'll put in like the stopwatch. right? Once we sell like millions of them, the next release will kind of add like a stopwatch to the app upgrade and so forth, right? So product manager typically kind of like drive the features into the product, and they would dictate the priorities, work very closely with developers to implement it along with designers on the design of the app itself. And that's typically what product managers do. And they also own the metrics of success for a product. So you might have metrics such as like, you know what, for the first month, I want to sell like 50,000 of this watch, right? Because I ship these features. The incremental gain of revenue as a result of us investing in this feature is X. So at the end of the development cycle, when we push this out, they measure to figure out, did we hit our goal? Did we hit our objective? If not, what corrective action do we need to take in order for us to get there in the next release? Right. So in a nutshell, that's what like, and I'm glossing over a lot of details, but that's what a product manager does. And then developer obviously depend on whether they work on the front end, back end, or an entire stack of
And what
technology.
is it?
They
And could you
implement the design.
define what is a front end versus back end and stacks for the audience out there who don't
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Like so,
They're not as
so
smart.
typically when it comes to technology,
Excuse me.
like the larger the company, the more specialized roles that you have. So in larger companies like the, just making an example, like the Amazon, the Google of the world, they might have a stack of technology where like in the front end, they have some sort of like UI framework that allows them to display like a web page. On the back end, they might have databases. They may have like middleware that kind of connect the front end to the database to grab data and display them. And when you update your app, they make sure that data is kind of like stored and saved all the way to the back end. So in larger companies, oftentimes you have dedicated role where they get dedicated engineers who work on a specific level of the deck. Whereas like smaller startup or like mid-sized company, you might have one engineer that does the entire stack, right? Like from writing the front end code to kind of like making sure there's like an object model like in the back end that kind of like make up the middleware to saving all the data in the back end and so forth, like front and back, right? Make sure that this thing also like run very smoothly, high performing, and also like secure, right? So that's what a full stack engineers typically do, and I'm sure like a lot more that I don't even know they do. Like, and then like for designers, we work very closely with the engineers as well as the PM to really turn the requirements from the PM, the product manager, into something that the engineers can look at and say, yep, we can execute. We have the data that you want. And on the front end, this is something that we can kind of build based on this spec that you provide us, right? Along with all the interactions and all the fun stuff in between.
And
So
then,
in a nutshell,
yeah.
that's sort of like the, yeah, go ahead.
No, in a nutshell, I want to hear the nutshell. And before I say I want to say something else, I didn't mean also people who weren't smart or people who could understand this, but I meant more people that weren't experienced in this field. It may sound, what the heck are you talking about? So we want to correct that.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
No,
what were you
like
saying?
it's a really good question too.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
here
I sometimes I've been doing it for a long time, and I just assume that
you
yeah,
assume,
like people
yeah.
would get it. I'm so glad to
But I'm so used to
clarify.
talking to such as we talked about earlier off the grid is, talking to the people who are a diverse audience. And when you talk to them, they're like, what are you doing? What's that? What's product design? They don't know what it is,
Yeah.
right? So it's like
Uh-huh.
I'm used to explaining it and dumbing it down, or I don't want to say the word dumbing it down, but simplifying it in a way to where they can understand, because it's not their field. They don't know what it is. They never heard of it. They weren't
Right, right,
experiencing it. They
right.
don't have anybody like that in their family.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So circling back to like surprisingly, like after like the last 10 minutes, I still remember the original questions you had for me, which is, so what does ownership mean in this context, right? So somehow we went on this like tangent and still we're like trying to circle back right now.
those are our
So like ownership
conversations.
really is that when you look at how like the triad of a product manager, a developer, or a team of developers, right? Like a team of PMs and designers. When we collaborate, it's never about like what each of us does individually. It's really about us collectively, how we can come together, leverage our own expertise to develop and design, or design, develop, and ultimately deliver a feature or a product that our customers will love and can really gain benefit from using it, right? Whether it is to solve a big problems they have or to make the life better, make it more efficient. whatever they care about, right? Like, so how, like for example, if you work for a food delivery service, right? You really try to understand. So for a customer who want to order food and have them deliver to their home, what are the things they care about? Do they care about, like the time? Do they care about the cost? Do they care about who delivers their food? So oftentimes it doesn't matter whether you're a designer or developer. If you have a strong sense of ownership, you care about whether what you develop and deliver ultimately make them happy, meet their needs. And that sort of go back to why ownership is important, because a lot of time the product manager might have to define a set of objective, right? And we could hit every single objective, and yet there are still things that we feel like we could really add to the equation to make the life of the customer better, right? And when you have that sense of ownership, you go out of your little corner, your boundary, and you reach out and say, hey, Mr. PM, like we feel like this is really important to the customer. Can we kind of add that to the product? By doing that, we believe it's going to make the customer more loyal, and ultimately that's going to benefit the product, right? When we can do all these things, then the product becomes very successful. But it's only because it starts by just having people who are just owner of the product, who feel very a strong sense of ownership to what they do and a sense of passion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of explaining it, and thank you for doing that. But on top of that, you have, I mean, I don't know. I think it's like when you're building products, and you're building teams, it's like, you have this thing which we call culture fit. And I would like, how
Mhm.
would you define culture fit for those that who don't know, who aren't experienced with these terminologies that we use internally?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously that
yeah, yeah.
that depends on the culture of a company. So like I alluded to a little earlier. So oftentimes, if you're in the market for a new job, and it would be really beneficial to go to the company's website, go to the career or job section. And most companies these days, they do have a section on the culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll discover that what they really value. It could be leadership, could be inclusiveness, it could be like collaboration. So these are really common attributes a lot of companies look for these days when they hire anybody, period, regardless of role, right? And to the point where I remember, like, it might be like an example from Airbnb where they actually came out and say, you know what, we don't care how talented you are, right? We don't care like if you're a superstar in your field, but if you're not a cultural fit, we're not gonna hire you, like, period. And that just goes to show you how important cultural fit really is. And the reason that is important is because when you bring somebody in from outside, you really want to make sure this person, at the end of the day, is a net add to the company, right? It's not where you might be adding in a certain area, but because this person is so difficult to work with, it end up creating a lot of work for other people to clean up, or this might be a person that often get into fight with other people, even though he's right or she's right, or maybe got a very strong point of view. If they cannot work with another person, then the company doesn't want them, right? For the most part. And that's why, like, a lot of company now looks for people who fits the mode of how they like to operate. At a nutshell, like, in a nutshell, that's what they really mean by cultural fit, right? Can we bring in a manager who hire and try to be very inclusive, who try to take into account of needs, who really try to listen to the diverse perspective of all the team members? Now, it might sound very obvious, but not everybody naturally have that, right? So the next question often company asks is that, if we see the potential, do we believe this person can be trained, right? Can improve or can take action, corrective actions to get to the point where they can do that, right? So I think at a high level, that's why company values cultural fit, right? Like, even though like, you'll never find somebody who's 100% fit all the time, right? But like, what you look for is, does this person hit all the major check boxes, right? For the things that are not, can they be like kind of like train or grow into that role? It could be because of somebody who's relatively new to the field, or it could be because somebody traditionally worked in a different industry, right? Where, like, these kind of cultures are not the norms. Whatever it might be, that's what companies look for. Do they have the foundational cultural fit? And for the little, like, the one or two areas, they might not be a fit today, can they be kind of like trained and kind of like get into that mode?
Wow, and that's very true, and totally, get it and understand, and the audience. I hope you guys pick that up. But one thing I'd also want to talk about is like, it's like how do we, as product designers and as leaders and people in this space, like how do we, how do we define, you know, who is that culture fit different, different from like a subconscious biases, right? So, for example, if you went to a similar school that I went to, and you grew up in a similar town that I
Hmm.
grew up into, and it's like I've got to decide between two or three people, and it's like there's one person, may have had more of of better cultural fit, but at the same time, this other person may have more in common. So, can we just, sideswipe that in our industry and say, hey, well, this person's more of a culture fit because of those things?
Right, right. Boy, that's a loaded question. And I think this is very honestly, I think this is also an area that as a individual who tries to get better at every day and try to grow, often that's something I ask myself: how can I make sure I can truly evaluate a candidate, or just in general look at things in a very unbiased perspective, truly listen. The way today I try to address that, and like many companies do, is I often try not to make that decision myself, right? I would leverage the collective intelligence of my team and the extended team to get their perspective. So many companies today, when they hire, let's say we hire a designer, or a company hires a designer, the interview loops does not start and stop with the hiring manager. We would actually form a design hiring committee, right? That's made up of designers, hiring managers, um, product managers, developers, right? And we really try to have everybody meet the candidate and vice versa. So that is a sort of like mutual two-way communication. And in this process, what we really try to do is to bring in a diverse set of perspectives to really try to understand this candidate from a sort of like a full 360 point of view. And when we get together at the end of the day, right, when we get into the huddle, we look at um, the outcome of these conversations. Like, do we see something that potentially could be alarming that happened across multiple interviews with multiple interviewers, right? So we try not to kind of base our decision on a single source of information. We really try to see if there are trends across different people that see the same thing, right?
Right,
Whether we like it or not.
right.
It's really one good way to minimize individual biases, and I feel like that's been a pretty good way.
Right, right, right. And I agree too, and I think that is one way that we can do that. But then it also pushes back questions, just like at the same point when everybody's
Mhm.
collectively, the same friends, the same schools, particularly, you know, um, have very similar interests, and then those are also the same people who are, judging those actual, participants or employ or future employees or prospects. It's like
Mhm.
subconscious biases can deeply kick in because it's like, hey, look, this person, reminds me of this situation. So maybe I might look at certain things with more of a biased way, but not really think about it that way. Like maybe certain things may bother me about this
Yeah, yeah,
person
like
that the other person
mhm.
freaking did, but it was just because this person didn't remind me of my friend or my cousin or something else they did. Or
Right.
does that make sense? What I'm saying? Because like
No, yeah, it does. Like,
I,
yeah.
I've literally
Like so imagine if I apply for a job, right? Like, and people like, oh boy, Dallas Cowboys fan. Man, this guy's got to be an idiot. Like, see, I can make that joke because I'm a Cowboys fan, right?
right, right.
So like this guy's gonna be an idiot, right? So how do you minimize the bias? I think like the way to do it is really like triangulate. Like so, like bringing another perspective is really helpful, right? And also like if you truly, as the hiring manager or the hiring team, you really want to get the best talent, you gotta be able to be open, right? And collect data. So these days, thanks to the internet, we're able to collect a lot of information about candidates. So without citing specific example, with a pretty recent hire of ours, we're able to just not just kind of like look at our own experience hiring that candidate. We actually went to social media, right? Did some research, and what we discovered was, wow, it's not just us. Like what we experienced when we interviewed a candidate, we saw the same thing happen in the person's previous employment, right? and that the people who left them comments were equally glowing, right? And so like, I think as sort of like the hiring team, I think you really owe it to yourself if you truly want to hire the best talent out there, right? You want to really provide an inclusive workplace. It's our responsibility to make sure we leave all these unbiases at the door. And to your point, I think with subconscious bias, a lot of time, I think you don't even know what you're biased against. And this is when bringing in like multiple perspective and being able to collect data really kind of help you to see if you're seeing things right or if you miss anything, if you have blind spot that you're not even thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally been in interviews and like secretly somebody's told me, "Oh, you went to a similar school as me, so that's why." Besides your great skills,
That's it. Wow, like, like really?
I mean, I'm being transparent here, man. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
we say in our field, we say a lot of fluff, right? We say a lot of
Hmm.
fluff, and
Yeah.
it all sounds PC, and it all sounds gravy and good, and it sounds ethically, like you're doing a good thing. It sounds admirable, but it's like the
Mm.
reality of things is like people are people, and people are tribal, and
Mhm.
people are they're comfortable, and we typically like things that keep us comfortable, or we feel safe, and it's like those things just
Yeah,
kick
yeah.
in. Those type of things, they shouldn't kick
And
in. They're bad. But it's
yeah.
like how do we really get away from it? I mean, you can go to companies that are bigger and they might have like diversity and flyers hanging all around, but it's like, you don't really see it happening. But it's just like there's this push, but then it's just not really happening. And it's like, there's,
Mhm.
I've seen women complain, "Oh, I was at so many different companies as a product designer and they didn't respect me, they didn't listen." And it's just like, these horror stories, from really good designers, that they've experienced at other
Right.
companies. So these biases obviously exist because I believe as a product designer, I believe a product designer is a problem solver. And so
Mhm.
with that being said,
Okay.
I'm always looking, to research the customers, the people journey. And
Mm.
for me, it's just like, hey, who am I working with? What are the people's journeys? What are they experience? So I can kind of get a little insight of like, what am I dealing with? Because you want to work with cross-functional teams collaboratively. You want to get to know them, and it's like you hear
Yeah,
some
yeah.
things once you start tearing down the walls of like their journeys, and it hasn't been as
Yeah,
non-biased
yeah.
as
It
we kumbaya it. You know what I mean?
it's unfortunate. Yeah, like, I think, like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. As a matter of fact, I think it's really unfortunate. Constantly, I think, like, a lot of people have to fight these battles that to me seems it's really a shame, like, given where we are. I think I thought we've made so much progress, but still, you hear people constantly having like these career roadblocks. So, in those cases, you know what? The really good thing is I've been taught long, long time ago to not worry about things we have no control over.
Ooh,
Think about
that's
things you can control, right? Like,
say
think
that.
about that.
Hold
Hey,
on,
you know what?
stop. Let's
If
back
this
that up.
place like cannot,
Let's
yeah, go
back that
ahead.
up, Steven. Say that one more time.
Yeah, control things that you can control.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we like.
Yeah, yeah, like right. So like we cannot control how other people look at us, but what we can control is like doesn't work out here, right? I know there are better employers out there that can really use my talent, that can really contribute, that can have better career, right? So you know what? If it doesn't work, it's their loss, right? I mean, we owe it to ourselves to really just keep moving, right? Move to a place where we are valued, that we can do good work. And I truly believe that there are like so many opportunities out there that if you're a talented individual, you should not really feel like this is the end. Like if it doesn't work out, find another place that where they truly value you, right? And if you can do that, then I think like it's almost like this self-reinforcing thing that just makes you like stronger, more confident, and over time, I think you become a better individual, a stronger
Oh,
professional. I
definitely,
truly
because
believe
you
that,
have to work with
and hopefully,
people.
like over time. Sorry, go ahead.
I said
I talked
definitely. I
over
agree
you.
with you 100% because you have to work with different people, and I think that you got to be a people
Mhm.
person when you're doing things like in tech and working with cross-functional teams. You need to be able to be a team player. You need to be able to work with different people who have opposing views and etc. You have to be able to work with each other, and that is one thing. When somebody has an opposing view, you still need to be able to work with them. You can't just write somebody off all the time and say, "Well, they don't agree with I agree, so
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
just a bad person. They're not a good team fit," and things like that. It's like you need that different view because maybe everybody here thinks the same and they could be voting for something, but maybe they're wrong because they're all thinking the same. Maybe they're looking at the data wrong, and you can get a false positive, if you're really pushing for it.
Right, right. No, I love what you said. Like, oftentimes I listen to like tons of podcasts and other stuff like outside of work, and
And
there was like this guy whose name's like George Gammon. He runs this sort of like podcast, and one of the things he often love to say is that he invite people who have like a different perspective that he have on investment because he wanted to really like not get into this echo chamber where everybody thinks exactly the same way he does. So I think it's a really good way. I think it challenges like intellectually. It challenges like to grow, to think differently, and over time, I think we can become a better person, a better professional when we can do that.
and I agree with you, but I think like a lot of times you do have ego. You know, the humans have egos. You know,
Mm,
let's get down to our core basic structure. We do have egos and we have opinions, and when those opinions are crossed, egos do kick in, especially those who are hey, look, we grab these titles, we put senior, we put director, and that
exactly.
automatically just
Right.
that these it gives these like these power positions or power plays, and so they are put in position for a reason. So it's like you kind of cross those. You got to make sure that you got that buy-in.
Oh yeah, yeah, like absolutely. Like you can't ship something unless they're like, "Yep, this looks good." It's like I mean, don't. I'm not trying to sort of like undersell the importance of politics. I think that happens in every workplace. At the same time, I truly believe that a lot of companies these days are, at least like I think speaking from personal experience, if you're very like strong rationale, like you know what you're talking about, a lot of like what we need to do as designer is to really work and improve and perfect our communication. Like
Ooh,
I often joke with people, and
yes,
it is so true, right? Like I'm sure you can relate to it.
yes,
It's not what you do, it's how you tell your story. Like
oh
can you
yes.
get somebody to see what you say and get them to see the vision that you have and sell them what you have. And often I've seen so many good designers who are really good at like the sort of digital level, right? But when it comes to like presenting and defending their design, things fall apart. And ultimately, right, from the perspective of like the people higher up, whether executive or like the directors, they look at this and say, well, I propose a counter argument, but the designer back off. So what am I supposed to do, right? Am I supposed to give up? So it's a two-way street of the way I look at it. Like if you're really passionate about it, you should really defend it and fight to the last last breath that you got, right? And you know what? A lot of time when you do that, like the opposite of what you think happened actually happens. You earn the respect of the person you get into this heated debate. I cannot tell you how many times I get into a heated discussion with designers, developers, and PMs. And at the end of it, when we're all said and done, we come out better, and we just go back to like what, having a drink, and we never let that kind of things bother us. So like I think like the point really is that when you get into these like kind of like battles and war situations, you at the end 9 and 10 times you actually build a strong relationship. It's just like when you get into a fight with your spouse, right? If you come out like being like adults and everything, you discover that relationship actually got stronger, right? In a lot of way, the same thing happens at work. When you fight with executive, you kind of like, I mean, and obviously in a civilized manner, right? Not calling names and none of that, right? You really present your case, even if at the end of the day you have to back down. You've earned the respect of the other individual, right? Because they see that you have principle, they see that you have a perspective. They respect you for that, right? So don't be afraid to kind of defend your turf, right? And oftentimes, by the flip side of the token, you truly have to understand that these are very intelligent people that we deal with most of the time, right? And they're very clear perspective. They might know things that we don't. They might have a direction of where, well, they might have a sense of where the company's going that you might not even be aware of. So as much as we're trying to defend and present our idea, we got to be able to just listen, truly listen to where the other person's coming from, and when it's all said and done, really try to put forth a solution that works best for the customer, works best for the company, right? And our role as designer these days is not necessarily try to come with the best idea, right? It's really try to kind of listen and bring together the best set of ideas, implement it on the UI, right? And just work with development team to really execute, right? So that it truly embodies the best idea that the team has and put it in front of the customer.
Right, totally. I mean, I think you touched on a lot of important details that a lot of people don't understand about product design or working in tech companies and teams and things like that. And I think communication is one of the biggest things that a lot of people do put down as not one of the highest things there, because it's like you need communication to communicate your idea, express your idea. You also need selling power. You need to be able to learn how to sell and communicate that to your stakeholders. And at the same time, you could be a great seller, but you still have to sell to that unique team, right? So it's
Right,
like
right.
those things.
Yeah.
It's like you could be the best seller in the world, but if you don't get it, if you can't buy and sell that to your actual team, then it doesn't make any difference, because it doesn't actually kick over. But I think those are really
Right.
imperative, and I think you really have to do that. You have to be able to have this communication. So I would even say, taking up, you know, uh, um, public speaking classes, practicing over and over again, talking about your projects and your pros and cons and how you actually went through your process, because you can get nervous, especially when you're in front of new
Mhm.
people. A lot of people get nervous, and even when I worked at bigger companies and first started off in there, it was like you go through this, I mean, I hate to say it, but let's be honest. Let's be honest. Imposter syndrome. You're like,
Mhm.
I'm good at this. I know I can do this. But then you get there and you're like, oh, wait.
Like so funny you said that. Like as I progress in my career, and I love one thing I love doing is observe how other people conduct themselves, specifically the really smart people that I respect. And what I discover is kind of like what you said. You tend to see a lot of like imposter like syndromes, like for people kind of early in their careers, they tend to use like really big words that nobody understand, right? But like as you get kind of like so like I'm saying like higher like in at least in the sort of like career ladder, like you look at some of the more established people, they actually flip things around. They try to talk in terms that everybody can understand. They try not to use these big words even though they have them in their own dictionary. They really try to communicate in a sense that people understand. Like I think along the way they make themselves appear to be authentic, and I think that's something that I cannot underscore enough. Be
Mm.
authentic and real, right? And when you try to communicate, it's not about like because I don't know, like the word sell sounds dirty, and I don't mean in that context. When we say sell, it's really to convince the other person this is the right thing to do. When it comes to like UX design, you'll hear that everybody has an opinion, right? Like how do you kind of like get everybody on the same page and convince them like of the 20 ideas that we can do, like this is the right thing to do, or maybe like we're doing like this for now with the mindset of one day we'll do these other things, but we're not quite there yet. So for now it's too premature to do this other UI when we are simply in step number one. So to really think through, to have the logic backing what you're saying and be authentic when you communicate so that everybody understands the rationale behind what you're saying, I think that in itself as a lifelong training.
And when you said, and that was great, Stephen, but when you said being authentic, what is it? Can you bring that up again? Like, what do you mean by being authentic? Because you also mentioned something about, limited vocabulary, not trying to sound so
Mhm.
glossy, and sound like you're reading from a dictionary, yeah, I think that's what you were kind of saying, kind of,
Yeah.
or is that some?
Yeah, yeah, like it's really just being. I don't know. Like I think like different people have different perspective. That's something that I hope to get better at myself. But to me, it's as simple as being transparent. Like like sometimes go in front of the engineers, like you know what, I explored like 20 different ideas. Like this is best I can come up with. But even then, I'm not super happy. If you have a better idea, please let me know because I try. But this is the best I can do today, right? When you can be humble and express kind of where you are and be truly honest about the kind of challenges you go through, I feel like it earned trust,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it can do that consistently in your communication because, like, you know what? It's real. Like, in what we do every day, there are things that we are tasked to solve, and we have no idea how to solve them. We try. We went through like 20 brainstorming sessions, and really, what you see right now is the best we can do, right? Because
right.
of like a number of limitations, constraints, and whatnot, right? Schedule, technology limitation. This is the best we can do. But if somebody else has a better idea, please speak up, or else this is what we can go with right now. I think when it comes to kind of working in tech, I think you'll hear that a lot. Like you have a lot of smart people, but it's a really challenging field. A lot of time, what you see out there is the best solution somebody or team of people can come up with at a point in time, given the constraint they have to live with. So I think like by being authentic, being truthful, being transparent, being able to represent yourself very clearly, I think that goes a long way. I'm sure there are like tons of other way people can do it better,
I
but
totally
this is sort of like
I totally agree with you. You
the
know,
way I know how.
being authentic does matter, but even at a I think it also depends on the personality and how you express that, how you communicate that.
Mhm.
Because some people can take that from some people, and you know, some people might say it in a different way, and it doesn't come across that way. It can come off as you're really aloof and you're not really caring, and you lack the passion. So it's like really depends on how
Mhm.
you educate and express that point of view to people as well. And I think that goes back to the whole tip of communication, like we talked about earlier, and you know, presentation skills
Right.
and how you deal with you know conflicting views and things like that. But I also would like to add is like you know, I think people you know the whole I know sales sounds like a dirty word. Yeah, we get it, but it's an easy way to kind of describe it because that's literally what you're doing. Like
Uh-huh.
people are expecting you to sell yourself, and you know, and I believe being authentic matters, but at some point, you know, you do have to balance your authenticity in some type of way because you know sometimes when you're doing presentation, people want to hire people who are winners. People want to hire people who sound like
Mhm.
they're they were able to sell or dirty word. They want to convince people that their idea was the best idea. That looks better for cross-functional teams that we have somebody here who has the
Yeah,
capabilities to sell.
yeah. Depends on your perspective on how you define a winner. Like if winner means being the star quarterback that can win a game in the fourth quarter every single time, right? That's certainly a winner, Tom
Right.
Brady. Or like if this is somebody that the team look at that can kind of like help the team cross the finish line every single time, like a coach, right? Coach doesn't play on the field every single game, like never, right? But the coach is able to rally the entire team to cross the finish line and beat the opponent, right? So to me, there are multiple ways of winning. Like, so you can be like the different kind of leaders. You can be looked at as the Steve Jobs of the company, where like the person always have the answer, or you can be a really great leader that can rally the entire team to cross the finish line to accomplish the common goal. That's another way. The longer I'm in the field, the more I feel like what each individual has different strengths. You really should understand what your strengths are, and ask yourself, right, what matters to the entire team at the end of the day? Like, is it about you just kind of like saying that everybody should do what I do and do what I say, or just kind of work out a way where the team collectively can design, develop, and deliver a feature that we can all be proud of, right? So I think there are many ways to define what a winner is, and I tend to look at you can be a winner in many different ways.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, and I think that goes back to culture. And even within some companies that are small or some companies that are big, different teams have totally different cultures. So you can have a different experience, completely different about a company based off of what team
Mhm.
you're in, right? Because they're all different
Very
sometimes.
much, and yeah, like and also like depends on your role in the company as well.
Yeah.
So you might be an IC that like own a particular project, but you can also be like a manager whose task is not necessarily working on any direct feature, but your task is to mentor your team, right? To kind of be a so like a sounding board for the team to inspire, right? To make sure everybody can do the best work. Can be unblocked when they have to, right? When they have like too many things, you jump in and help them out. Like, I mean, you can be very successful in that way as well. So it really depends on the company, depends on the culture, and your specific role on the team. But when it comes to design, like the way I look at it is like there are more than one way to win.
Yes, there always is more one way to win. It's just, it's
Yeah,
about the best idea that wins, right? Isn't that the tip?
very much. Yeah. Going back to your earlier point about like just not having like ego really is the worst enemy to deliver a great product, and like it's something that I think we have to really be conscientious about not letting that get in the way. Just when you see another idea who's better, right? Try really what I love to kind of like compare this to is like out of body. Sometimes you watch like these Hollywood like scary movies.
Hmm.
You see this person's the souls can like leave the body. So oftentimes that's how I look at it, right? As a designer, you almost have to have that perspective where when you hear criticism, try to leave the body, right? Look at this very objectively, right? Look at all the facts, right? And see if the other person truly have a point. Whether it's like having design critiques with your own team where they're like, hey, Steven, your idea is horrible. Here's why. You're like, yeah, you're right. You're right. That's horrible. I love your idea better. Being able to just very like drop your ego and suck that into your design just because it's for the greater good. I think that's an important attribute. So it goes back to what we talked about earlier about cultural fit, right?
Yes.
Having low ego to be able to collaborate with others effectively. That's exactly what we're talking about.
And at the same time, there's, like I said, I mean, one thing that we have in our industry in general is we have these buzzwords, and everybody kind of collectively says these same buzzwords, but it's not really so much often that everybody subscribes to them really in reality, right? It's like we say them because we all know them, and it's like, oh, we want low ego, but then you do run across those who
Yeah.
have a lot of high ego, and you run across also equal many that are really humble and that are willing to help you, and
Mhm.
are willing to support each other, and really just gracious, and trying to help each other grow. And those are the best times. Those are the best times when you work with other product leaders who are like that, who are just really have
Yeah.
empathy, and who just really want to build a great product, and get things shipping, and just come collectively together, and be happy, and build cool shit. Excuse me.
Yeah, like not just that. I think like yeah, like that's a really good way to put it. Building cool shit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like I think as much as like I think like people in high tech enjoy the result, I think we often overlook the value of the journey itself.
Yeah.
I often tell people like the best thing about if you go to blind, right, like everybody talk about like TC, like total compensation, right? What people overlook really is the experience of being part of building something great and just constantly building a better version of yourself every day. Like if you have the mindset to grow, there's no shortage of mentorships and smart people we can learn from every single day. So in a way, like a lot of people spend like how much money in a 4-year degree. When you work in high tech, if you're in the right situation, you get the benefit of learning from some of the smartest people in the world every single day. You do that for a long time. You can't help but become a better professional, better person at the end of it, right? So, really, what's not to like? And aside from the fact that you're delivering some really cool stuff, right? And you get paid, like for a lot of people, pretty decently or really well. So, to me, it's really not a bad gig to get into.
And that's also another thing too, though. I mean, like, there's another skill that kicks in too. This is where the dirty word sales comes back into, is your TC, your total
Mhm.
compensation. It's like you got to really know how to sell yourself, and not sell yourself too short, because people aren't going to give you more money just because they're just nice. You've got to be able to sell that. Hey, why do you deserve
Yeah.
this amount of money? And
Mm.
versus the other other candidates I have, like, why would I pay you more? Like, you have to be able to, or just even
Right, right,
simply
right.
asking for it, the law of asking.
I love what you said. I think it's so true. Like I've been in situations on the hiring side where like things are not always logical. Like you look at two candidates and they end up getting like different pay. And as a matter of fact, like sometimes you see like candidates with lesser capability get paid more, right? And the only difference really is that one negotiated, the other didn't, right? And you're like, how could that be? How could like somebody seemingly with less experience and ability, make more money? Well, to your point, because they ask, they negotiate. Often people like to ask the questions like, "Hey, what do like Ben level X make in a certain company?" Right? We've all seen those questions, and I'm like, that's kind of pointless because that doesn't apply to you. What somebody made for this Ben level is not going to be the same for you because you're not able to sell it yourself. To your point, right? You're not able to articulate the value you're able to deliver for this company. And you know what? To truly find out what you're worth, the best way is to really just go and explore different opportunities. Like, you know what? The best barometers for how much you're worth is it's kind of like football. God, I hate keep going back to that, right? When you kind of like when you're a free agent, when you're able to negotiate with different club. Well, one club would pay you like 2 million a year, the other would pay you four, right? Because what you can do for that other club is like twice as much as what this club that pays you $2 million value to add. Well, then what you do is you go to the club that paid you like $4 million. So in real life, the same deal, right? Like never when you're in a situation where you apply for a job, try not to, take the first deal that you get. Really try to explore, try out different companies, and really the best way to gauge how much you're actually worth is by how much somebody's willing to give you, to offer you, right? And you'll be surprised, like different companies for the same set of skills to the same level can have a sizable discrepancy in terms of what they offer you.
Oh yeah, and there's
So, like the best way to find out what it's really worth is to shop yourself around.
Oh, I mean, yes, definitely, totally, and I get it. But I wanted to also mention, like, because it brought me out of this whole conversation. It kind of brought me up to think about, there's so many different arts or skills that you have to have within, being a product designer
Mhm.
in general, or somebody a part of the product team in general, because you have to be able to sell yourself. So there's different positions or skill sets that you need just to be this one entity. I mean, you're pretty much a brand yourself. You
Mhm.
walk around, you're selling yourself, you're presenting yourself and your case. You're almost doing some lawyer stuff right there. You've got to convince the judge that you're the right candidate to get the job. You're the one to do it. So you're almost like
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
almost you're pretty much doing things like freelancing, things like that. And then it's like now you're in there, you're actually
yeah,
doing the visual work. Now you have to do things on the graphic perspective. Now you're doing the interaction. So this is more about psychology. And then you're having to do things, think about the problem as far as design thinking and thinking for the people and, the business next, right? I mean, you're putting all these things into one. You have to be self-aware. We're looking for these, proactivity. I mean, these are almost like super
yeah.
people.
Right,
Super.
right. Like I often look at like other people who has it all put together. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. How did you do that?
Yeah.
But I think like to your point, right? Like it's a big sell job, and like this is why like I think in our line of work, like as a product designer, oftentimes we stress the importance of storytelling. And you notice that skill does not apply in design alone, right? When we go out and talk to other clients, talk to like if you're in a situation of applying for work, your ability to sell yourself and make yourself desirable ultimately affect the kind of offer that you get. So I think to your point that you talked about earlier, it's kind of skills that something we can keep getting better at. Just because you feel like you have it down today doesn't mean that you cannot improve. And like oftentimes, I think the only way to get better at is just keep going at it. And whether
Repetition,
it is,
repetition,
I often joke
repetition.
with my friends, very much. Well, in what way? Like we see mathematicians.
Oh, I said repetition, repetition, repetition.
Oh, repetition. Oh, yeah, like all right, yeah, like absolutely. And I would tell my friends that even when you're not looking for a job, you should go interview because the interview you did like 2 years ago probably is outdated. What I mean by that is that over the course of the last 2 years, you increased value in terms of what you can deliver for company, right? So what you did like 2 years ago, that same like pitch does not apply to today, right? So you really should go out there, apply for work, and just practice selling yourself. Like to your point about repetitions, the more you're able to do it, the more natural. And maybe like the first time you miss a couple of things here and there, like by repetitions, you get better and better over time. And by the time you get to that last stop you had, where you eventually land that offer, the reason you got the offer that you did, that you're happy with, is because of, like you said, repetitions. You've told the story over and over again. You've sharpened your pitch so much that now you nailed it with in a very concise way that other people can see the value. You make yourself so desirable, the other company cannot say no, right? You are very naturally head and shoulders above all the other people applying for the same job. And to your point, it's not something that if you've done it for a while, you can get good at, just like you cannot get good at football by just watching TV like I do at home. It's like come on, that should have been like 15-yard completion instead of 10. Right. You got to just go in and practice.
Right. And you've got to know, you got to learn the jargon. You've got to learn the jargon of the industry. You've got to learn how the industry communicates, what are the, terminologies
Mm,
that we typically use
yeah.
internally, within large organizations or within product teams in general. And you need to be able to
Right, right,
understand
right.
those very thoroughly because it's a part of explaining yourself and selling yourself internally to any type of like product owner or any person who's a hiring manager and things like that. And you have to, and I would even go on to tell people
Mm.
the entire hiring process is another science. It's entirely another
In what
science.
way? In what way? Like, please do
Oh
share.
yeah,
I
I'm gonna dig
mean,
in. I'm gonna dig in. So how it's there's some people who can literally go through, you know, interviews and get like
mm,
five of them boom,
Yeah, yeah.
offers,
Right,
offers,
right. Yeah.
offers, 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 and they, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna,
Right,
I
right.
can pick, and I'm gonna challenge every, company, or this person offered me this offer and this offer, so who's gonna do? I'm gonna sell to the highest bidder, right? So you have these,
Right, right.
some people who are just great at the interviewing process and the communication
Right,
process when
right.
they get inside that they can just sell, they can sell, water as lemonade, and it's just like, and
Give me like a bottle, please. Like I'll take one right now.
yeah, I
But
mean,
it's so true. Like I think like they are kind of like related, but sort of like different skill sets, right? Like I think the ability to tell a great story, versus so like you could be like really amazing car salesperson without being able to drive a car, right? Like so, one is not necessarily the other. Like ideally, we love to find that person that's like equally good at both, right? But oftentimes you discover it's not the case. But to your point, like there are people who are just really good at it. Either they're gifted, or you know what? Don't overlook the fact that maybe they work really hard at it, right? A lot of time we look at somebody like, wow, this comes easy to them. Well, it didn't. They worked really hard behind the scene to make that happen.
yeah, that's true.
So
But,
I think
um,
credit to them. I mean, good for them if they can do that. I mean, maybe I got something I can learn from them, right?
I mean, but
Maybe I should read the book that the
there
guy
there are
or the
people who
girl
have an
wrote.
art to it, Stephen. There are people who have an art
Mhm.
to the hiring process because there is a process. There is a process.
Yes,
There
yeah.
is, the initial phone call. There is, your initial interview with, whatever product owner or designer, whatever the company has it set up as. You might do
Mhm.
an app critique. You might do a
Right,
walkthrough
right,
on your
yeah.
presentation. Then you might do that with other stakeholders. Then maybe you might do a whiteboard session. Maybe you might just want to sit down and, just do some, just conversational things with other leaders and see if you're the right cultural fit. Every company has a little bit of
Mhm.
different tests, but they get kind of repetitive and similar at some point. And it's like, there's an art to that.
You know, it might go back to what you said about repetition, right? Like what we don't know is like how much work somebody's put in behind the scene to make it happen, to make it look so easy. Like so, I truly believe that. Like that there's like a bit of luck, a little bit of like naturally born talent. But I'm sure those people work so hard behind the scene that we might not be aware of, right? Like they're like, maybe I practice like whiteboard exercises. Like I've done like 99 of them at home before this meeting. I researched the company. Like you'll be amazed, like how many people go on an interview without even researching what product the company does like before the interview. Like it's amazing, right? The really good ones, if you're not naturally gifted, you cannot like BS your way out of it. um, People like myself, right, we really should study the company to understand the product, understand what we're getting into. And I think for most people that's not a bad practice, really. Repetitions, study ahead of time. It's like no different than when we do high school exams or university college exams, right? You got to just practice, you got to just study, you got to get yourself ready and prepare yourself. And if you can do that, you can go in and do a good job because you spend the time to prepare for it.
No, I totally agree. I mean, you
So yeah,
got,
like it takes hard work. That's what I believe in. Unless you're like naturally gifted,
I
then you
mean,
can just go in and
I don't just, here's the thing. You know, I I
Mhm.
know a lot of people that do, they study really hard, and they do hard work. I think if you're in this field, you're obviously doing hard work. But I think from
Mhm.
what I've seen experience wise with many different product designers and different people I've even tried to mentor and stuff like that before, or have, and help them get different jobs and things like that, it's just like, hey, look,
Mhm.
there are just some people who are, they find the right process. They're able to detect the right process for the hiring process where others may have not seen it. And I've talked to tons of product designers where they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
don't even see how the system works. And like I've looked at, I'm like, there's a system to this. There's a structure to this whole thing. And they was like, well, there's no.
Right,
I've heard,
right.
well, there's no pattern. There's no pattern to it. It's just you just go in there and be your
Mhm.
authentic self. And it's like, no, there's a freaking pattern. And the interviews are structured. They're looking for
No.
certain. They're looking for certain
Yeah, just be
things.
real. Don't be yourself. Yeah.
you know,
Uh,
they're looking for design thinking. They're
yeah.
looking for interaction design. They're
Right.
looking for visual design,
Uh-huh.
UX, UI, things like that. Soft skills. They're looking for these things. So there's a structure. During the app critique, they're looking for certain things. You may know exactly how
Right.
to do these things, but if you don't say them the right way, you you can't convince them that you know what you're talking
And
about.
it's so true. Like it's really sad. Like in a way, you got to play the game. You got to just like know what you say when you say it. Like like it's almost like you got to say the things they want to hear.
Smooth talker.
Like that is very yeah, yeah. Like I hate to admit it, and I think there was like a lot of truth to it, right? Like obviously, it depends on the exact interview, but I suspect that that is true in a lot of cases. And I'm sure you'll find like a lot of tips and tricks on the web about what the right thing to say and when to say it, what you want to show and stuff like that. But again, it goes back to what I said about preparations. Are you willing to be humble to kind of recognize where you are? Like if you go to like 100 interviews and you're getting like not a single interview, or sorry, if you apply for 100 jobs, you're not getting any applications, right? Like who's the problem? Well, you are. I hate to say it, but you know what? That tells me that you're doing something wrong in this process to not even give yourself a chance to get into the interview process. Now, if you're into interview process, like let's say you do 10 and you get no offer out of 10, then again, you got to just like self introspect and ask yourself, what area should I improve on? What can I do better tomorrow?
And also,
And it goes back to what we said earlier, right?
okay.
Let's just go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no. Go back to saying what earlier. Say that one more time. I want to hear this.
Really about just control what you can control, right? Like identify what do I need to work on? Like why am I not getting through to the next step,
But
right?
see, that's the thing about that. It's like,
Comparison,
Stephen, how does one identify that without knowing the existing structure? Because there are some type of existing
yeah,
structures that exist, and you kind of either have to just have a friend who knows it, who's worked in these certain companies and
yeah,
kind of can figure out how it works, or you just have to get lucky and figure it out yourself, or trial and error and just figure, oh, well, maybe I said this wrong. Oh, why did I do this? Or maybe you interviewed with some friends. It is repetition, but you have to be able to detect and be self-aware of what you might have done wrong and be able to figure out how they interpreted that, because you might not interpret that and maybe your friend might not.
You're like, I'm doing just fine. Like, why do they not listen to me?
They just don't like me.
Like I think that's certainly like I think some people learn by just self introspection. Like you do like almost like a post mortem, like after every interview. Like they kind of like say, what could I have done better? Like these are like the really like kind of aggressive type where they actually do like post mortems. Like okay, so in this interview, I knew I effed up like in these three areas, right? They kind of wrote it down. What can I do like to improve on it? And then other people who might not be like as self-aware, right? They can do mock interview with a friends, with somebody who's been around, find a mentor, right? And go through this, or just seek their advice to see like, hey, this is what I did, and can you give me some feedback on what I did well or didn't do so well. I often feel like if you have the desire to improve, there are multiple avenues to get better. If you don't even know what the problem is today, then I think the first things you got to do is figure out what the problem is. Like I said, if you go into like 10 interviews, did not get any like sort of like offer or like at least like progress to the next stage, then we have to ask ourselves, what did we do wrong? Like, are we even applying for the right job? Do we have the right level of skills? Or like imagine, right, if I am a IC today, try to apply for a VP, chances are it doesn't matter how many applications I submit, I'm not going to get it just because I do not qualify. So part of it is also understand, am I just trying to overreach beyond what my current experience and skill set is, right? So ask yourself a lot of these questions.
I think that's very
Right.
true,
And
but I also look at people who, who take that courage to actually go up higher than what they maybe presumably are, because even that they grow, and you never know, you might actually get the job. But
like, don't get me wrong, I think that's all great, but like at some point, right? Like using
you got to be
example,
realistic
if
at
you
some
apply
point.
to like 10 jobs, right? No, like what I'm trying to say is that if you apply for like 10 VP jobs and you get no responses, you're like, I got 2 years of experience out of college. I wonder why people did not take it. So at some point, like I think you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe like more realistically, I first gotta have a development plan to allow them to first
Right,
get
you
to
have
a
you need
manager,
to have some type of leverage,
director,
and
and
right, you need to have some type of leverage that values the position that you're trying to apply for. If it doesn't equal that, then it kind of looks like
right.
it should be a no-brainer why you're not actually getting those internal interviews. But I do see like the interviewing game it is a whole nother process, and there are ways that you can identify how to amp that. You can amp up your inbound emails and your requests, and you just have to know all these little triggers and terminologies and words. It's almost like job SEO. It's
I love how you put it. That's exactly it, right? Like I think I've worked with a lot of folks where Like we decided to leave like these keywords in the resume because like they're not meant for human, they're meant for machines, right? Like yeah, like it's important. Like this is like a case where we try to optimize the SEO so that at some point some humans can look at it's like, yeah, we want to bring you in.
Right. They're looking for
But yeah, like I
keywords.
think like it is all about keywords these days. Yeah, like and you kind of like put those big words strategically in your portfolio, resume, such that it get past all the screening by the machines and get to human, and to the point where you kind of like tell such an amazing, compelling story that somebody cannot wait to pick up the phone and talk to you. Right. I think to your point, there is a structure, there is a way to really optimize your chance to go deep into this process. Now, just to make it clear, right? Like, I'm not discouraging people from like kind of think bigger and go bigger. They should. I was just trying to like make it very like sort of clear in that example that one reasons people might not get responses in their applications because one, it could be like there's a mismatch between the skill set the company's looking for and kind of where they are in the career. The other could be like this might happen to some people, but not everybody's like you have like multiple typos in your resume and you're not even like aware of it. So you can have the most amazing skill and experience and so forth. People look at this like, you know what? When it comes to designer, we need somebody who are like detail oriented. Like like this person have like multiple typos. So
And you're
I know it sounds like
and it also
superficial,
needs to be
right?
designed very well if you're a designer. I think
Yeah,
I think it
yeah.
helps
Like
if
try not
your
to like,
resume is original a little bit, you know,
yeah.
not the
Try
same.
not to be like too like Microsoft Word reliant, like everything's a bullet point. It's really funny because I often tell people as designers, like our resume, portfolio, everything that we put together is being judged, not just the content, right? Content's important. Being able to write concisely and just kind of highlight in a sort of like consumable manner for the other person to get what value you
See
deliver.
that?
That's important, but also like the visual design of it, right? Typography and the hierarchy of your content,
And
all that
scannability.
matters.
Yeah.
And scam, exactly, right? Yeah.
But
So
but
don't
imagine
overlook the little things.
Stephen, a designer. I'm excuse me, sorry, and I wanted to say this really fast before I actually forgot. But imagine
Yeah.
people also who are the owners of the product, like the developers and the PMs and things like that, where they also, when they're actually going in for these interviews, they also have to make sure that their resumes are up to par. I mean, they might not be designers, but at some point it has to be readable because I've literally gotten, I've gotten Stanford students and also Harvard students who are, had their masters and they send me the resume. They're like, hey, I'm trying to get into, this company such and such. That's a Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it may be. What do you think about my resume? And I'm like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, yeah.
How
Like
did you
I
get
like
out
I
of?
100% agree with you. Like it's not just like good resume. It's not just for designers, right? Like and I've worked with people where like we start off with like a 4-page resume. Literally, like this particular candidate's been at a high tech company for the last 17 years, and like he basically listed everything that he did in bullet point format, going back all the way to like 17 years ago when he started. So my question was, do you really feel like people care about what you did 17 years ago? He's like, probably not. Then why do you even throw that in, right? I don't know. I did it. The point with the resume is not about listing what you've done, is to kind of pull together your career story and put it in a very concise manner. So somebody who looked at it within the first hopefully 10 seconds can immediately get your career journey, progressions, and most importantly, the value you can deliver for them today and
Right.
tomorrow,
Right.
right?
And you need to think about
And
like what
sometimes,
they're actually looking
yeah.
for too, as well, right? Like you have to think about, is it easily
Mm.
digestible? Is it something that they're actually like, do you know what they're looking for? You might need to cater that resume towards that actual, job.
Yeah, yeah, like very much. And although like I think the approach I've taken is slightly different, like because I'm too lazy to like potentially customize a version of it for every different type of situations. So what I try to do is abstract it at a higher level, where I try to convey in my resume, right, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of competency that regardless of whether it is like I don't know a toy company or medical instrument company, I can deliver, right? Like so I feel like that is a It's like a better way to go instead of me trying to customize it for every situation. So it's really, again, like going back to what we said, right? It's got to be about value that you can deliver, right? And if you have like more than 2 pages into your resume, I think that might be a sign to for yourself to look at, like, what can I do to further sort of like abstract it so that people can really appreciate what it can do for them. Sometimes people feel like the more the better, like when in reality it's the opposite. The more stuff you put in, the more noises there are, and means that it weakens the signal that people can see. Like you might have 1 or 2 things that are amazing that you really want people to see, but if you put like a lot of words in your resume, people might actually overlook and not see them.
Too
So
wordy.
think about the signal to noise ratio of your resume as well.
But see, that's another thing that we actually experience doing product design is we think about, sometimes we're doing copy. So we have this experience about copy because we're doing copy sometimes for our products, so it's like, we may not be the copy, but we're doing it. We're doing content, and things like that.
Right,
So
right.
we have that perspective, at least some of those who consider ourselves senior or above, right? We have that different perspective of like what needs to go on there, what needs to, catch the eye on the resume, visual hierarchy, font,
Mhm.
bold, and etc. Which font styles are actually really good, and what's gonna
Yeah, yeah.
grasp. What about CTAs in our actual resumes? We're gonna think
Mhm.
about those things. And what I was also bringing up earlier is like when we were talking about like customization of resume. So I think where I'm saying is like create an obvious scalable one size fits all for most companies. But then are these specific companies that may want your expertise, but they may want that to be specific more to that company. So you always might want to
Oh,
have that little customized one on the side for that specific company. You might have to make that
yeah.
small iteration for that
Yeah,
one company you love.
absolutely. It goes, yeah, like goes back to how badly you want a job, right? Like, hey, going back to like getting back at you, can you explain to the audience what CTA stand for?
Oh, yes, guys. So this is
Oh,
CTAs. CTAs are the things that basically is our call to action, right? This is what gets it's a psychological
right.
type of visual design encompassed by like visual hierarchy. You can make a button, that could be start or go. So it's a lot of psychology play because you're thinking about what word can motivate this user to do a certain action you want to have them
Yeah,
do, right? So it's the
free
intentionality of
stuff.
creating
What?
that
Yeah,
button. What'd you say?
right, right. Like I like to go on Craigslist, and like if you put anything under the free section, boy, it gets snapped up right away. So yeah, like I think about call to action, right? Like just like put a copy free, or get it now, or try. I think
But
oftentimes we
CTA
see.
is a big thing also that
But
has to do with sales though. Like CTA is a part of sales. Like how you have to think psychologically, what words,
mm,
right, could you use to
right,
actually
right,
get a user to actually do the
yeah,
certain
yeah,
intention that you want them to
right,
do? And then on top of that, you're also
you're
thinking about
right.
visual design, with color
Yeah,
and
yeah,
font
mhm,
that can also help support this. So there's just these
right, right.
layers and layers. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
like I like it. Like God, like I cannot help but think how much the industry invests in like perfecting the CTA, right? Like from increasing the contrast to using the color, to like kind of A/B testing the copy to make sure it optimizes success of the CTA.
Right. And what colors
Anyway, so
push
like
in
sorry, yeah,
trust? What colors push in trust? Certain colors push more with
yeah,
trust and they mean certain things. Stop for red sign, right? You need to know those. And then there's
right,
different
yeah,
countries that have different types of CTAs and the way they also view their actual websites. They might view it from right to left and et cetera, or different from like a Z pattern. It depends. Maybe if you're in Iran, so it's set up completely different depending on what country you are in
right, right,
sometimes like on
yeah.
how those visual rules may exist.
Very, very much. I think if you ever start a podcast on CTAs, we should have a follow on that for sure.
Yeah, we should call it CTA.
CTA, CTA. Hey, make sure nobody's taken that already. Like if somebody else did, like shame
Well,
on
we
you.
have it on record.
Well,
Have you ever
talking
heard of
about CTAs,
have you ever heard of a poor man's copyright? We have it on record right now.
no, it's all right.
Yeah.
No, like I
We
never
just
heard of
coined
that.
it. We can
No.
argue about this in court.
There you go. Awesome. Hey, I was gonna say like, what do we? How do we get into? Oh yeah, like so. I mean, in terms of customizing the resume, yeah, like I mean, it really comes down to how badly you want a job. I often believe that the more effort you put in, the more you get out, right? Like I've seen so many situations where the applicants would say, like, I applied for like 200 jobs, but only get like three replies. Well, the problem is when you send the same resume and cover letter to everybody, um, it really shows. I don't know, like, I think employers have a way to tell if somebody like is just kind of like, what do they call, like, there's a term for it, like that ends with spray. A
Spray and
spray and
pray.
pray. There's a term.
Spray and
You're gonna
pray.
spray and just pray that like somebody get back to you, right? Like, and I've had candidates where they even forgot to one change the date of the cover letter. I'm like, dude, really amazing. You were able to apply for this job before we even put it out there, right? And then another situation where like a candidate would forget to change the name of the company, right?
Uh-oh.
I love to like work for. Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah.
So I'm gonna
So
be
like sometimes I think you have to be really aware of some of these like human mistakes and try to eliminate them when you do a spray and pray. For the jobs you really love, you really should customize it because you care about it, right? And your effort should really reflect that.
I mean, at a certain point, our company's really demanding at a certain level of the product designer as a cover letter and applying. At what level do you
Mhm.
need to be really applying at jobs? And even if you are, at a point to where you're just applying for a job, have you mastered the skill of the hiring process? Have you really reached a point in your career where you are, you're the hot item in the room, supply and demand?
Like I think like cover letter is a really good way to differentiate yourself because everybody has a resume, and I would say like for if you make like the cover letter optional, what you discover is that for like every 10 applications you get, you typically get one or two who would provide you with the cover letter. And
Mm.
even for those one or two, oftentimes they're very generic. So I kind of feel like candidates often overlook this opportunity to really
Yeah,
differentiate.
I
So
could agree with you.
imagine if you went the length to research a company. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to write the whole essay. Like, I actually think that would be counterproductive. Like, right? You're like, who has the time to read the entire cover letter in addition to resume and the portfolio? But what you can really do is write a paragraph or two to really kind of share something insightful from your research, right? That tells the recruiters that you went above and beyond and understand the company's product or whatever you're trying to do for them, right? And kind of weave that into the letter to make it personable, connect with them, and I think that would really elevate your chance of moving further in the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
In the process,
I agree with you, but I think at a
right?
certain point,
Yeah.
like for example, right now, like, you know, I I haven't applied for a job in two or 3 years. Jobs just
Mhm.
at a certain level, jobs just come to me. I don't even apply them anymore. So I learned how
Dude, but
to.
not everybody as good as you are, man. Like you're
No,
just
no,
like
no,
you're not for people like
no,
myself.
no, no. We've got to be as good as Steven. Uh,
Like I'm
I,
begging for work every day,
I
man.
just,
I mean, we
I
should
just,
talk more often. I'll tell
yeah,
you.
I just do like there's strategic things that are within the process. I understand the process.
Mhm.
And then I think everything is, being a product designer, it's a process, but also the hiring process is a process. And so, if you're understanding the process and what people are looking for, then you can understand
Mhm.
how to position yourself there. And then you're the hot item in the room, and you don't have to do so
Right,
much
right.
groundwork because that's what, for me, I feel like
Mhm.
that's what recruiters do. If you make yourself the shiny
And
ornament
you
in
know
the
what?
room, recruiters are going to look for you. They're like, "Hey, wait, you're the shiny, like,
Yeah, you're
yeah,
shiny objects. Yeah, like,
yeah."
dude. I mean,
It's
you
like,
like all the check boxes we're looking for, and you know what? Like that's really like credit to you, and you put yourself in that position, right? Like nothing comes for free,
oh
and
no,
I
oh
think that's
no,
what I
a
try
lot
to
of
stress.
failing, a lot of
Like,
failing.
right, like you work hard to get to where you are, and like we talked about this earlier about communications, about being able to recognize your values, right, your position, where you are in your career, and being able to communicate it both verbally and in written format and the digital artifacts we put out there, right? Like, so a lot of people, what they don't get is that a lot of time when we see like, hey, why is it so easy for certain individual to get jobs? Because like they have these assets out there that make themselves very attractive. They branded themselves very clearly on the value proposition, and they spend their career perfecting everything they do to get to this point. So I think like yeah, like I think what we see a lot of time is the outcome of all the work people put in over the years,
The
right?
sleepless
And,
nights.
and when it comes to communications, right, it might seem very easy for somebody. It's like, why is it that this person able to solve themselves so very easily? What they might not see is that this person went through like 200 iterations to get to this point. Prior to that, every single day is about putting in the work to refine the message, right? To go from like a single 2-page document down to a single paragraph to explain who they are in the format of like a 30-second elevator pitch, right? Nothing comes easy. But I think for most people anyway. So what we often see is the outcome. We might not see all the work that people put in to get to the point they are today.
Oh no, and I 100% agree. But there are certain people. I believe in efficiency, a scalability and
Mm,
efficiency within the craft that you're doing. I feel
mm,
that given for my own self, I learned through my own sweat and tears. I learned through the
mm,
hard way, figuring it out myself strategically and just researching. Fail, fail, fail. Learn, 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 reflect, 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 circle, circle, just like a
right.
product designer would actually do in real life or at a job.
Yeah, yeah.
This is how I learned. I look for, okay, why did this come back like this? What did I do wrong? I'm thinking all day.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, see, that's exactly what I just talked about, right? Like, you put in so much work, like you might not even like think that is hard work, but every single day you listen to yourself, you look at your experience, you're like, what can I do better? And you do a better, version of what you did the next day.
And I
Like
agree.
over time, you become who you are because of all the work that you put in, right?
No, and I agree with that. But I think my
Mm,
other thing is that I realized as well. I don't know. I've kind of seen like the journey of different people within this in the industry coming in at different levels, and it's based
mm,
off of knowing the entry level structures of how to get in or knowing the right people sometimes. And that could
mm,
be here and there, but either knowing the process in general I feel is very important because it could you could skip a lot of trial and error. I would say
yes,
most
yes.
people never even really learn those things at all because they don't have that network, or there's certain people that are in these high profile companies, and so they don't really get the
Yeah.
experience until years maybe or maybe never to get into these certain companies
Mhm,
that look at products on a high scale. But then there are the other ones who I feel are like me, who are just going to be resilient and say, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure
mhm,
this out. Fail, fail, fail. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I know how to do this, but what did I do wrong? And they're going to reflect a lot of self awareness and just keep on going until they figure it out. But then there's
mm,
others who I've ran across who they had a friend. They had a friend. They
mhm.
worked at the company and they helped him get
Yeah.
into the company. They helped him. They told him what the structure was and they practiced it.
Mhm.
And so if you know if you know the answers to the test and how the teacher's going to grade you, all you have to do is study for the test.
Yeah, like so, like it goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Now, if you are resourceful to the point where you can get the answer to the test, so to speak, right? And allows you to get there. I think like that's one way of getting there, right? Like, but for the other like people who can, I think like what you went through, I think that's a really good way. And the other thing, actually, I might have said it before. Like I tend to value the process itself because I truly believe that you might be handed the answer to the test, but you don't learn anything from it, right? So over the long haul, um, are you better at what you do? Like you might have passed this test, but when you have the same test like 2 years from now, can you ace that when you don't have that connection?
I
Versus what you've gone through, you ingrain that in yourself. Now that's part of who you are,
well
right? And doesn't matter whether it's this company or the next company, you
I
can reuse and apply the
I
same
agree. I
principle.
agree with you. I agree with you. But I will say, from what I think, what I'm saying in this specific situation is, these people are intelligent enough to figure out once they learn these couple of things to get in, they already know the trouble,
Mhm,
the things they're going to be looking for and what people are looking to judge, and so they just start focusing on on perfecting those. So
yeah.
while the ship is sailing, they're still building while they're going. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the startup
Right,
thing
right.
where they say you're jumping off the building, but you're building and assembling things while you're falling down. It's the same type of thing. Like
Yeah.
some people, actually, I've seen a lot of people that have done this. Like when I've worked at bigger tier companies, where they've gotten through a friend, and their friend showed them like, oh,
Mhm.
so what happens when this happens? If they know the answer, they can learn from it faster.
You know what? Like more power to them, right? Like
And
I
people are
think,
and
um,
these people are not, they're not stupid people in general. They're smart people,
mhm,
but I'm just saying, if you sometimes know the problem that you might face, you can prepare for it ahead of time. And if you're intelligent enough,
yeah,
it's easier to bypass certain situations that you might, because somebody else seen it before you. It's like having a mentor. You
mhm,
know, it
yeah,
doesn't mean that you
and you know
don't
what?
work hard and you won't know how to do it, but you learn how to, you know ahead of time that this might happen, so therefore you can prepare for
Yeah.
it. Where the other person might just walk
Mhm.
blindly and has to learn
In
through
a way, like that's
experience.
not bad. I mean, like I think depends on how you look at life. I mean, like for people who are able to just get results, in a way, I think there's a place and value for that in this world where we're in a very outcome driven world, right? Like the people who can get to the result in a most efficient way. Hey, more power to them. Good for them, right? It's just like investing. Like if you kind of bought Bitcoin at like $5 a pop, right? Like you know what? Great for you, right? And then people would just jump in like I don't know what it is, like 60K, right? Now it's like 40K.
Right.
You're like, okay, you know, might not pan out. Like, but you know what? I think there are a lot to be said about being smart, being ahead of the curve, and
And
I think
luck.
if you're that kind of person who can get the result right away, more power to you, man. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to network, network, network with the right people. You're the average of the five most people you hang out
Mhm.
with the most. And if you don't have a network, you've got to find one. And if you don't find one, you've got to just figure it out yourself until you can get one. And I think there's a power into
That's an
networks.
excellent point. That's a really excellent point. We haven't even like talked about that today. Like, how do you leverage your network and consistently grow your network? And something that I think a lot of people underappreciate. And like, I cannot tell you how often that I hear like, you know, so and so got a job because of who they know, not just what they know, right? Like, I'm not saying not who they know, but
It's
not
pretty
just who
typical.
they know.
It happens a lot. I've talked to plenty of people on
It
teams, and a lot of it is this person went to school with me. This person worked with me at another company, and
is.
so they brought like, I mean, I've literally seen at big companies like 30 people from the same company.
Whoa, really? Wow. I mean, that's a little
Bible.
lopsided.
Yeah, it's
Like you
like,
start to question like the practice of the company. Like you start to like, you know, just hire people from the same company over and over
well,
again. You're like,
again, it's a
okay, we have like a problem with the hiring process.
you're right, but it's like if you think about it though, it's culture fit, and then they do this thing that's been going on in Silicon Valley for a long time. It's this whole
Mhm.
thing like, if you're a smart person, you know, obviously you're friends with smarter people. So obviously somebody who recommends you to the company believes that you're smart. And so that person helps you prepare for the actual
Mhm.
entry test or the interview, and you know what to look out for. And of course you're an intelligent person, right? You have to have intelligence. Nobody's
Mhm.
saying that you're just getting in for free. You have the proper intelligence
Right,
to do
right.
it, but you don't, you know, you can bypass a lot of the BS that other people won't know that's right there in
Mhm.
front of them. So now you're just, you know, you're cruising through. You're not, it's not totally, you
Mhm.
know, risk free, but you're cruising through a little bit smoother. So the hits are a little bit softer for you versus somebody else who doesn't know that there's a door coming and opening up, and there's just like whatever coming at their face. They're just gonna have to figure it out or just maneuver it when they get to it. So there is a science to it, but I've literally talked around because I'm a people person. I'll ask, I'll say, hey, so how'd you get here? Oh, so how'd you get here? And
Yeah.
I'll do a consensus of the average people who I spoke to, and I
Right.
heard their story. And typically, what I've
Uh-huh.
mostly discovered through my conversations is that a lot of people got there because their friend worked here or they recommended them here. And I'm like, well,
Right.
how did you study? Oh, well, my friend did it, and so she got it here, and so she, you know, we practiced with her. So okay,
Right. Right.
help.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think. I mean, it certainly happens, right? Like I think the risk of the company who does the hiring is that I think what we talked about at the beginning, like do they overlook potentially better candidates from outside of like this circle, right? There might be like better, stronger candidates they overlook. There might be people they overlook for sort of complementary skill set, right? Like if you keep getting people from the same school, one theory is that you get a lot of the same type of people, right? Like,
But it's done.
but to make no,
It,
sorry, go ahead.
I said, yeah, but it's done. I mean, how there
It is done, yeah, yeah. So,
certain schools get, you know, get automatically into certain tech companies, certain engineers. So you have to go to certain schools. I
mhm,
don't say you have to, but you'll see an overflood of supply of students or
yeah, yeah.
developers or engineers from certain schools, and you'll ask different students like, how did you get in here? And then what I found is there's a structure to that. You go to a school where the
Mhm,
professor knows the CEO of these companies, and they're coming to them for the best talent because they think that, for example, Stanford or Harvard has the best engineer talent, or it's going to be Berkeley. They're going to consistently go to these certain schools for talent, and they have these professors. Hey, my professor was such and such at that school, so I trust
Right,
them
right.
on bringing in the talent.
Yeah, like it's not just like I think like the school connections, but also like the name brand recognition, right? Like so if you're trying to recruit people from uh engineering, there are like a certain number of top ranked schools in United States where like a lot of companies want to source their engineers from because these schools tend to produce good quality engineers. When you look at back at the data, if I get somebody from I'm just picking thing out of random, right? Like from U of Michigan, right? Consistently, we look at all the people we hire from that university, they consistently produce results. So why would a company not go back, right? And it just so happened that, like, you know what? When you go back and recruit from that schools, they know somebody who already worked in this company. So what they end up doing is like have somebody's like, just alum go back to the school and try to get them and join the company. So in a way, I think it's more of a name brand effect than anything else. Like we've had good results hiring from these schools, and we just go back for more until it's. I think just human nature, right?
Yeah,
We
and
are risk averse in a sense, right? Like why would you hire from University of? I can't say that because it's
yeah,
public,
you can't
right?
say
From
that.
yeah, no, I was gonna just like just kind of throw like a self-deprecating humor and like okay, maybe it's not a good idea. But the point is that I think why would you hire from a school that you don't really know a lot about, right? Why would you take that risk when you can hire from the school that you kind of develop talent from over and over again? So I think a lot of times just like people are being risk averse, not try to take risks that they don't. Yeah,
But then,
I mean
Stephen,
that's
you
just
have these things where you had recently where, I mean, again, there's even getting schools, there's a system to that. It's another system.
yeah,
You find out, and it gets public when, when certain celebrities and certain millionaires and billionaires, got publicly busted for, paying and
yeah.
donating money and things like that. But then it's just like,
Wow, that
so
yeah, I don't know if that never happened. Like, come
that,
on, like who would bribe the
yeah,
school to like get
exactly. For
yeah.
longest, people have been denying these things. This does never happen.
Uh-huh.
And equal opportunity in
Right, right.
schools, and people are just smarter, and these people are just applying themselves. And it's just
Yeah,
like, how do you know that? If you have more money, you get more honey.
yeah, yeah.
These are the
I think that's
facts.
the
These are the facts.
that I think like that's an unfortunate fact of life that we got to
Always
live with. You know
existed.
what? It goes back to what I said earlier, which is you like at the end of the day, we can control what we can control. I think a lot of things that people do we might not agree with, but we can kind of like figure out how we can move forward despite all the resistance, like in the system, right? That kind of like potential might not be fair, might not give us, the fair opportunity. But then the really good thing is if you fully believe what I said, we control what we can control. I think it empowers you to do some really good thing, and empowers us to find opportunities. And I think like the great thing about the country we live in is just there were like a lot of opportunities out there, and yeah, like there's some sort of like network relationship and stuff like that. I think that in a way, I think that exists in all cultures in all places. I think there's always an aspect of that, regardless of where you are, whether it's in the United States or outside.
Anywhere. Yep. I mean, but there's just
Mhm.
I think what I think I talk on is like, yeah, you have to have skills. Skills are important. All the skills we mentioned and we all talked about today are very important. But there's also
Mhm.
there's also these doors, and there's also these other ways of getting in, and there's a lot of people who take advantage of that. And I think
Right.
I don't want to discount our skills and the hard work that we've all done and things like that, and other product designers out there have done, or product owners in general. But there are some people who have gotten some better advantage at certain things. And, it's sometimes you might want to call it luck, or sometimes it just might be through hard work or being in the
Mhm.
right place at the right time, whatever you want to call it. But there are structures that exist no matter what you do in this world. And sometimes if you understand these structures, my thing is not to run from the structures, but to understand them more. If you run at your
Yeah,
enemy
yeah.
and understand it more, then you can actually take advantage of it more, instead of just saying, oh, well, I can't change anything, or this is not fair. So I don't think of it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
How the heck can I manipulate it in my favor?
Right, right. How can I join a club, right?
Exactly. How can we get in?
Yeah, like I love how you look at it, right? Like, like there are two ways. Either you beat the system, you join the system, or like I'm sure there are a third way. In a
We
way, it's really about aware of the world we live in and evaluate it and ask yourself, like, what do you want to do and how do I get there? Like, doesn't matter which path it is. There's so many different paths to success, right? Like, just pick the path that you feel comfortable with, that you can take on and just go at it.
Yeah. And one thing I do is honestly, for those who are around me who are curious, and if I see them struggling or they're wanting to find
Mhm.
out more, I will, if they ask me a question or they want to, talk to me really fast, I will take the time if I'm not that busy just, give them an ear because it's just like,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm paying homage or I'm giving back philanthropy or something saying, hey, look, I know these ways because I went through the hard way and I know how hard it was just figuring some of these things out without
Right.
having someone to just tell you a couple little things that could totally change your career trajectory, just like a Nintendo
Right,
game.
right. No, I love what you said. I think like for old backs like myself, I think like that's really like a way to do it. And I'm so glad for young guys like yourself, like doing the same thing. Just giving back is the one of the more satisfying thing that I ever felt. Sometimes could be like to a designer, sometimes could be for a colleague who might not be in design. Like for example, right? Uh, like with the designer hat, often we can really help other people design a resume, like on a copy, on really just highlighting the values, right? And just kind of like just talk people through the process, talk them through what we know, and just really pass on the wisdom that we've gained over the years, like by going through these processes, and maybe point out things they can do better than what we've done, right? And just kind of keep helping other people get better, and it's good karma.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. But you also have. I mean, I don't know if are you still training people and helping them with their resumes and providing classes and things like that? Is that still are you still doing that or what's that?
Yeah, yeah, like I still am, although lately not as much. Before COVID, I was like running a class locally. I would do like a monthly boot camp for designers or people who are interested in getting into the career or just explore. And what I try to do with the boot camp is really just give them a framework to learn and also be real because a lot of time I think a lot of boot camps out there tend to overpromise and tell like, hey, you know what, just do like three month boot camp and you'll be a designer, right? We all know it's not that simple. So for me, it's really about just providing a structure for people to learn. That's what I try to accomplish with that bootcamp, and I also do like some sort of like one-on-one consultancy. Dive deeper into people's resume, portfolio, case studies, and application process, right? And help them prepare. And hopefully, like you said, a lot of time, I think when you're new into this game, what I need to say, what to say, and how to prepare myself. And that's kind of things I really hope to help people to prepare for themselves so that um, they have better outcome. They can really reduce the frustrations and get there sooner than it might normally would for most
Yes.
people.
Yes, agreed. I mean, we know that, getting anything, good takes a lot of work no matter what. And being a product
Mhm.
designer and being an owner, being a hiring manager, all these are a lot of pressure and a lot of skills that one has to instill in themselves in general. And, definitely want to give a shout out to everyone who works really hard to, build great products. But Stephen, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. But before we get off, I'd also like to know where can people reach you if they're interested in product design and learning more?
Yeah, yeah. I have a website called Stephen Ma Designs with the STEVENMA I can't even spell DESIGNS.com. So yeah, you can look me up there and contact me from the website.
Awesome. And I'll
So
put
yeah, like I think feel free to reach out to me. Any questions? I think if you feel like I can help you in any way, or just want somebody to chat because you're lonely, I think that might be a good idea. Just hit me up. If you're lonely, go hit up like Tavares. He's a really good
Oh, no, 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 don't
companion.
do that.
Yeah,
There's
he's a
Tinder for that.
what is this thing called Tinder? Uh,
But yeah,
hey, before we end, I just want to say like thank you for this opportunity. It was like a blast. I think like at this point, probably nobody will still be listening, but if they are, I mean, just want to say how amazing you've been, and it's good to get on your program.
awesome. Same here, man. Steven, I think you're a great guy, and I think that you're giving back is really imperative to the whole industry. And it's the little things that count that help people in big ways. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate you giving back and stuff like that and helping others. Thank you so much. I'm also going to talk with you later once I get everything up, but definitely send me your links and everything else like that. I'll also put it in the actual podcast itself. So why it's sticking there forever, people could just consistently, every time they listen to this episode, tap back into there as another outlet to reach you. Yeah.
Right.
But thank you.
Hopefully I don't get the message like when I'm retired.
Ah!
Oh, that's what I did. Like,
You're too
well,
young to
we'll see. I
retire.
think it's almost like a time capsule, right? Like,
Well, your
and
kids,
people are like, but you look different. Yeah, that was like, dude, that was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
your kids might still be in the business. You never know. They can still profit.
You
Have the
never
same
know.
email address, right?
Yeah, you never know.
But anyways, yeah, just hang on for a
All right,
second.
best of luck with your podcast.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. And hang on for a second. We got to wait for everything to download smoothly.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.